Welcome to the 20th Annual Brattleboro Literary Festival. I'm Diana Whitney, one of the festival organizers and a poet and editor here in Brattleboro. Thank you so much for joining us today for Poetry and Conversation. You can use the chat function to show some love for our readers, respond to the poems, and you can also ask any questions that you have. We'll be having a conversation. You can use either the chat or the Q&A button. And if your question's already been submitted, you can click the thumbs up icon to upvote it. There will also be links in the chat to purchase the poet's books and to donate to the festival, which is entirely run by volunteers. And a special thank you to all of our sponsors. So I am so happy to be here today with Elizabeth Powell and Chard deNiord. I wish that we were here in person in Brattleboro, but really this is the next best thing. Elizabeth Powell is author of 3 books of poems, most recently Atomizer, released by LSU Press in 2020, and praised by the Boston Globe as a collection of confident poems, ones that disrupt and magnify our relationship with one way in which we sense the world. Her stunning second book, Willie Loman's Reckless Daughter, Living Truthfully Under Imaginary Circumstances, was named a Books We Love 2016 by The New Yorker. Her novel, Concerning the Holy Ghost's Interpretation of J.Crew Catalogs, was published in 2019 in the UK. She is the editor-in-chief and poetry editor of Green Mountains Review and the chair of writing and literature of Northern Vermont University. Powell is one of the most bold and imaginative poets writing today. Willie Loman's Reckless Daughter explored identity through the lens of the theater, retelling her family's story in ambitious poems that became a conversation with postmodern America. Now in Atomizer, she presents a world reflected through our most elusive sense, olfaction. With wit and insight, Powell explores perfume and fragrance as a means of seduction, a form of subversive femininity, a lens to view our broken world. She examines the urgent questions of our time, interrogating patriarchy and authoritarianism, and becoming a fierce truth teller who wields humor as a weapon. This book is a tour de force dressed in top notes and bass notes, examining love in the age of online dating, drawing from everything from the Song of Songs to semen catalogs found in a milking parlor. It is my great pleasure to welcome Elizabeth Powell.
Thank you so much, Diana, for having me and for the really lovely introduction. And I'm so happy to be here with 2 of my favorite people and poets, Diana and Chard, and thank you so much. I think I'll start with some new poems, and I'll start with the one that I've just written, and then I'm going to maybe read some baseball poems since the championship series are on. The Dodgers are on tonight, and I like the Dodgers, but okay. So the first poem, not that humorous, but it does have a dairy in it. And it's a poem I wrote in response to the growing anti-Semitism at UVM and in Northern Vermont. UVM was just featured in the Washington Post with American University for anti-Semitic acts and organizational acts. The survivors group won't let Jews in it that support Israel at UVM. Anyway, this poem is called Filthy Jew. First they shave all their heads, as if they are prisoners in their pens. My grandfather restrained one heifer after another. He was grimacing in his striped coveralls. The barn smelled of candles and blood. Ritual and milk stink. The hot iron dehorning and disbudding, cauterization around the base of the horn. The neighbor helping, rotating a horn back and forth, twisting his wrist for a proper burn, leaving a copper-colored ring around the base like a tree stump after it's cut for firewood. I try to link stares with my favorite one, her eyes So wide they look as if they were each birthing giant marbles. Bandages and long strips of sticky tape to control flies, to prevent maggots, which is what the boys called out on the playground when they searched my then silk thin hair, just washed, resplendent in baby shampoo, for horns or horn buds. Maybe they felt them on the top of my head, buds I didn't know were there. Was this a game? I didn't know. Where are your horns? They shouted and pulled harder. I had not recalled my own debudding. The boy put his boot in my stomach, damp suede, like the cow's glistening skin when they come in from the April snow. Like now, years later, books arranged like heifers in stalls awaiting their turn. I wonder if the boy now thinks he made a mistake, feels terrible as I forgive him his brutal childhood. I stare out the library window at the university where spring emerges, woke out of this memory into where I hear the protesters chanting. I see colleagues, friends, students. My head burns. Only the gods have horns. Okay, I'm going to read a baseball poem called Ave Maria after a Frank O'Hara poem of the same title. Ave Maria. Mothers of America, let your children attend baseball games. Fill the empty seats with all who want. Let them remove the cardboard cutouts of enlarged photographs of doctors and nurses who work in pandemic wards, who are trying to save America from itself. Instead, let them vaccinate your children with baseball's magic cures and other mysteries of science. Let your kids eat hot dogs, get belly aches of burnt popcorn and peanuts, slushies in a souvenir helmet with plastic spoons. Mothers, let the roar of the crowd at the ninth inning home run be the call that reminds them whatever lies beyond the fence is part of the game, urgent and front page important. Mothers, let your children follow all stray balls to the end of the parking lots, past the boarded up malls and drive through latte stands, past the shoddy prefab McMansions and closed colleges, straight into the knowledge that when all other dreams evaporate with morning air, there's still the dream of baseball. Let the cracking bat signal a new era of cured, non-asthmatic children, marching in confettied freedom parades. Cancel all the despots' corporate season boxes. Turn them into kindergartens where children can learn how to keep score civilly, cheer for underdogs. Mothers of America, let the grace of a perfect curveball not throw them, but show them how they can survive the unexpected. Let that curveball be the prayer that will heal all average pain. Let the pitch veer straight into the source of all dilemma, reincarnated through many lives, never letting the cheers subside. Oh, mothers, don't blame me if they go daft, half-baked, and bewildered on their iPhones because you wouldn't let them go. Here's another new poem. It's called Dust. Dust. Learn to be slower. Learn the method of how to disintegrate, like piano sounds as they melt into the dusty velvet curtains. Learn to rise like that dust as you walk on a fourth-class road, unpaved, no rain, for weeks. Learn to walk as if the soles of your feet were listening to the steps of everyone else who came before. Learn to locate yourself in space and in time for the first time. Learn to read a topographic map so that when you hear the new sound of your being, you can measure your way by coordinates narrating yourself to the place where all stories are held so tightly in your chest, which is the chest of the cliff near the wandering, cold, blue agate river. Learn how those answers wish to climb out and up into the atmosphere like cedar smoke. Learn birdsong to understand your pulse, so you can write in a meter any language will understand. Learn that you are a river meandering and that a mother has set her baby in a basket into your current so you can open your life to God's work finally. Learn you are in a portal in space looking down from a great height at the Sierra. Learn to tell which is a grain of sand and which grain is a lie upon a lie meant to deceive you. Learn to tell the pink dust of microplastics from the rock of 1,000 years. Learn to remember everything you've forgotten. And I'll read one more and then hand it over to Chard. It's a prose poem from a series called Rituals and Spells I Do So Nothing Heinous Happens. And this one's called Double Checking the Baby Monitor, Postpartum OCD and Me. Baby in the microwave, baby off the terrace, baby stolen by terrorists. How many babies have I run over in the last 20 minutes? Baby in the microwave, baby off the terrace. I've been knocked up, knocked out. I am too young to know what to do. My new husband, old enough to be my father, clearly doesn't like me, doesn't talk. I speak the language of baby monitor. Everything is organic and not tested on animals because we are in Vermont. Sing, sing, home on the range. Yet war blares on TV just in time for dinner. Joy of cooking casserole, silver palette cookbook salad. Vermont town tap water tastes like the apocalypse. My mouth has a chunk of electricity stuck in the back of it. I hear the end of the world in the baby monitor. I dream the lottery numbers and wake to forget them. I rock the baby. As long as I watch Wheel of Fortune, the world remains calm. I cross my fingers, wear a cross. Baby in the microwave, baby off the terrace, baby stolen by terrorists, baby made into ice cream by Ben and Jerry. When will you be home from the office? I ask in English, translated from the baby monitor to my new husband. The question means I'm scared to be by myself with the baby and the baby monitor. I've been knocked up and knocked down. Everything is organic and locally sourced and not tested on animals. Prozac is new. I won't touch it. Where has Wheel of Fortune gone, the spinning wheel of chance? I will be okay. Maybe. Baby on the roof of the train station. Maybe. Okay, baby. A war in the desert blares on TV just in time for dinner. Sing. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And back to Diana.
Wow, thank you so much, Liz. I love hearing the new work and the really timely poems responding to what's happening right now in our world, and the baby monitor poem, and like the double meanings of monitor, the mother being monitored too. So Chard is going to read, and then we'll have a conversation. Chard deNiord is the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently in My Unknowing, released by the University of Pittsburgh Press in 2020. He's also the author of 2 critically acclaimed books of interviews with eminent American poets. deNiord was the 8th Poet Laureate of Vermont from 2015 to 2019, and he co-founded the New England College MFA program in poetry, among other writing programs. He is Professor Emeritus of English and Creative Writing at Providence College, the essay editor at Plume Poetry Journal, and a board member of the Sundog Poetry Center. He lives in Westminster, West Vermont with his wife, Liz. In all his writing, deNiord offers us the gift of close attention. His essays and interviews reveal his deep empathy and intelligence, while his poems have a generous spirit, resonant with observations of animals and the earth. Reading in My Unknowing becomes a meditative immersion. We float at a holy distance over the earth, herein recognized as the heaven it has always been, says Carolyn Forche. deNiord examines grief and loss, love and transcendence in clear musical lines, pulling weeds in the garden, attuned to the report of the hermit thrush at dusk, or transported by the movements of the goddess of maple at evening, a being who breathed a chill that slowed the sap inside the phloem. deNiord is a spiritual poet grounded in the natural world, and I'm delighted that we get to hear him read his poems today. Please welcome Chard deNiord.
Thank you, Diana. It's a very humbling introduction. And hello, Liz. It's such a great honor and pleasure to read with you as always. And it's wonderful to be here today. I'm going to just read a few poems from the recent book, and also a new one or two maybe from a new manuscript that I'm working on called I Stand Beneath the Mountain with an Illiterate Heart. But I thought I'd start with, you were talking about the animals, Diana. I would start with a credo of sorts called frog. My tongue leapt out of my mouth when I lied to her and hopped away to the stream below the house. Mute then, I started to write the truth. My tongue turned wild in the stream for which I was glad and unashamed. I listen now from my porch to the complex things it says in the distance about my heart, how hard it is to tell the truth inside my mouth, how much it needs to sing in the dark. So I think I'll read a few poems from this new book next, which is called In My Unknowing, and start with a poem called I Wept with Joy Above the River. And it harkens back to a 1,000-year-old poem called Earth Took of Earth, and which has this wonderful line in it, this sobering line called Earth with Ill. And so I thought it would be appropriate to read this in this time of the terrible plague that we're all suffering from in one way or another. I wept with joy above the river. I wept with joy above the river. I wept with joy above, I'm sorry, let me start over. I wept with joy above the river. I wept with sorrow above the river. My tears were clear, both sweet and bitter. One leaf cried out to another, empty me today of all my color. Fill me tomorrow with a shot of sugar. This was the still ritual for my feet, to stand on the earth that took of earth, earth with ill, and sing. This next poem is, I've become sort of obsessed inexplicably with a meteorologist and weather people. You know, it's a mystery why you write and the poets end up writing what they write about. But this is called Weatherman, and this also became a little bit of a credo. There's a reference to the phrase "the slip" in this poem. The slip is a firing slip, someone who's just been fired. And you know, I thought poets often have a hard time holding down jobs because they're so distracted with other things, their poems and writing specifically. So the phrase "the slip" is a resignation or a termination slip here. Weatherman. A cloud spelled out a rune I couldn't read fast enough before it morphed into another form that changed again. So I recited something true enough from an ancient book. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, round and round it goes. The screen went blank and then the slip. No matter, I thought, I'll drive a truck. The clouds are codes for reading the blues, I said beneath my breath as I walked out into the rain with my umbrella, an attitude that kept me lean if unemployed. A hermit thrush reported the dusk somewhere in the woods on my way home, and I called back like a human bird who'd lost his wings. Light is such a fickle thing, but I sing for it. I'll read the poem that that Diana just mentioned, goddess of maple at evening. It's hard to live in Vermont without becoming obsessed with maple syrup. Goddess of maple at evening. She breathed a chill that slowed the sap inside the phloem, stood perfectly still inside the dark, then walked to a field where the distance crooned in a small blue voice how close it was, how the gravity of sky pulls you up like steam from the arch. She sang along until the silence soloed in a northern wind, then headed back to the sugar stand and drank from a maple to thin her blood with the spirit of sap, to quicken its pace to the speed of sound, then hear its boom inside her heart, to quicken her mind to the speed of light with another suck from the flooded tap. This next poem is a checklist for us all as citizens in times of despots. A checklist, how to live through what we've lived through for the past 5 or so years, not recently so much, but from 2016 to 20. Checklist. The bone that aches in the rain of lies, a turnip instead of cake, the fire that feeds on the breath of witnesses, even a stone that speaks. The echo of her no in the outskirts and streets, the sword he brought instead of peace, the red coal and angel places on the tongue like a treat, the sentence of his sentence, pennies worth more than gold, others and then some, the tree with so many tongues that says, the truth resides inside the wind and blows for those who hear it. A kiss on the cheek that doesn't turn, the nerve that takes its stand by keeping its seat. The pauper in the park who says, of these ends, it is the right of the people to alert or abolish it. The bell that heals itself by ringing, a smile in the hole, the eye that sees when closed, waking, waking. I think I'll read now a few, just one or two from this new manuscript. I stand beneath the mountain with a literate heart. This first one, I have this shirt I keep in my closet that has a stain on it. It's a beautiful shirt. This is a beautiful shirt also, but there's another shirt that this has stains all over it, but they're supposed to be there. And I can't get rid of it. So I decided I would write about it. Shirt. A shirt hung ruined in my closet among my other shirts, sheathed in plastic. I wore it once to a dinner with angels who were bedighted in the whitest fabric. It was a heavenly banquet until I spilled some chocolate on my collar and pocket. Keep washing, I begged the darkness inside my closet, which was the only wash that washed it. But such was life in paradise, where even the smallest spot stained the righteous, where just a thought turned nude to naked. So ruined then for dining again with the boring angels, I wore it as the latest fashion I manufactured by simply spilling in a line of garments I called original. Let's see, just two more, I think. This is a poem called The Loggers. The loggers, who are devastating the landscapes across the earth, especially I was thinking particularly of the rainforest in Brazil when I wrote this. The loggers move from tree to tree in the thrill of felling, feeling the sky inside their eyes as the canopies open onto forever, and the blue, blue hue of heaven croons a song called Nothing, called Everything, as the chorus of foliage suffs along beneath the noise of Brobdingnagian saws at the necks of oaks, pines, palmettos, palmitos, capucs, baobabs, ashes, palms, ipe, teaks, redwoods, locusts, walnuts, mahoganies, birches, hickories, beeches, cedars, spruces, hemlocks, cherries, and firs for a reason they can't explain other than to say, we're following a longing to raise the trees we love, and because they're there is all, with a cost we can't resist to tear the sky, and also, dare we say, the supralapsarian saw, because we can, which sounds depraved, we know, but echoes as a call that lures us into the oldest groves where the hermit thrush incants a song that grows as an oral seed inside the ear, inside our ears. Oh, holy, holy, purity, purity, sweetly, sweetly. And the chickadees stutter, upbraids in vain. There's something deeply wrong beneath it that is swelled to a progress that is no less than the clear-cut forests that are void of any hawthorn effect, which might have disabused you of the fact that a tree amounts to only a stick on the scale of your hearts. When you felt so many, you have no notion of the loss you've wrought, because you've thought from the start that the genius of saws, skidders, splitters, and trucks permitted you license to do as you wish, which you have, in fact, because it's your job, felling trees in heaven's theater, and the industry demands it, and you're good at it, God damn it, and it's thrilling besides to watch them fall so slowly across the sky and onto the ground, where they shake the earth itself like the word that fell at the start, and because the music of cracks, crashes, and thuds has drugged your blood with a thirst to drink the sky, with your already loaded eyes in the din of Husqvarnas, Poulins, Steels, and Tiger Cats. I'm going to read one last poem here. After listening to the news today, I just want to say this poem is, how to say this exactly? It's not for Senator Manchin. It's to Senator Manchin. It's called Dispatch from Gaia. The question of landing somewhere did not occur earlier to the peoples who had decided to modernize the planet. That's a quote from the wonderful philosopher Bruno Latour. Dispatch from Gaia. Mother's singing to us now in a loud, soft voice. Put your ear to the air and ground and see. Mother's singing in the brush. You are me, you are me, you are me. Mother's shedding her veils across the earth. Mother's starting her sentences with the word unless. Mother's wearing a tattered dress. Mother's running a temperature. Mother's echoing on the porch of our ears. The small rain down can rain. Mother's weeping sour tears. Mother's howling, it's late, my dears. Mother's chirping, you're so many now, what to do? Mother's soloing in the overstory, love for nothing if you can't save me. Mother's barking runes in the alley. Nothing never turns to something when already there's far too much. Wonder lives in the dirt like a worm. Filaments and wings rhyme in the air. Every creature is stranger and therefore far more beautiful and original than anything anyone could ever imagine. Mother's soughing in the breeze. I'm waiting to hear. Mother's writing timetables on the board of sky and then erasing them. Mother's splashing Rorschachs in the clouds, each one of which translates, this is the age of necessity, my darlings, this very second. Mother's yipping in her sleep and then saying nothing when she wakes. Mother's growling, you've swelled a progress to its tipping point. Mother's twinkling from the stars to regard her from afar. Mother's cawing, you must do what seems impossible now, but you've done it before. Mother's peeping, I'm miraculous, I'm miraculous, I'm miraculous. Mother's writing indelibly on water, if you don't lament the Pyrean ibex, the passenger pigeon, the stellar sea cow, the western black rhinoceros, the dodo, the quagga, the pinta island tortoise, you'll have no heart at all in the end to save yourselves. Mothers cooing so sweetly, you must imagine, imagine, imagine in order to start. Mothers hooting, science is not political, not political, not political. Mothers speaking in so many languages that are nonetheless one. Mothers quacking and chirping and barking and putting and purring and growling and braying and snorting and yodeling and keening and grunting and laughing and hissing and screaming and whispering. Mothers speaking silently in every language. Listen. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Chard. I love hearing the new poems. I loved hearing them from you too, Liz. And I want to start with a couple of questions, but for everyone who's here with us in the audience, please put any thoughts or questions that you have in either the chat or the little Q&A function, and we'd love to hear from you. So it's interesting that you mentioned the obsession with meteorologists, because I wanted to ask both of you about your obsessions, both, you know, maybe current, or what were the obsessions that drove your latest book, and that idea that what poets are obsessed with is a mystery. I know it may be hard to articulate, but maybe just what you're fixating on and how these obsessions either shape your poems or your writing process. And maybe we'll start with Liz and then move to Chard.
That's such an interesting question, Diana. And thanks, Chard. That was just amazing. So like balletic lyricism. It made me feel like I wanted to, go back to my old modern dance class. So thank you. I think that for me, in the past, a lot of the questions have been in response to events and situations that I couldn't make sense of, and histories and ideas and ways of living. And I think what's changing for me now is that I'm becoming more obsessed with listening to things that I have no idea, like trying to listen to the sounds of what I don't know, and being more open to that rather than responding. And I think that has something to do with aging. And, lately I'm just really interested more so in the natural world. And the meteorology is funny, Chard, because I always listen to the weather report on VPR and I'm so wrapped in it, and then I have no idea what it just said. How about you?
Yeah, I hear you, Liz. Thank you. I've already mentioned meteorology, but I think that as the older I get, I really become more and more sort of obsessed with just the idea of the other. I think when we're younger, we are obsessed with ourselves and sing the song of ourselves, for better, for worse, often for worse. But so the older I get, the more I really become fascinated with a phrase that Malcolm Cowley used to describe Walt Whitman's poems, the transpersonal self, the self that crosses over from the poet or the speaker to another, and trying to imagine the life of others, whether it's another person or a grouse or an ant, just an immense particular that's alive and fascinating in ways that I don't see at first at all. And people often hide themselves, and so I often have to just use my imagination in this obsession, in thinking about who the other really is. And I'm often wrong, but the muse tends to take me places that it sort of just nullifies that worry. And so I think this new book, which is I Stand Beneath the Mountain with an Illiterate Heart, has really awakened me more and more self-consciously to that obsession.
Great. I find the meteorology thing really interesting. I noticed someone who's in the audience talked about their being in love with the weatherman growing up in New York. And I think that it is fascinating listening to that language, but not understanding it, especially as the weather gets more and more strange and ominous.
Mhm.
So I am also interested, Chard, how at first when you said meteorology, I thought you were going to say meter is in poetic meter, which is so resonant and anchoring to all of your poems. So I like how that works sonically.
Well, for better or for worse, I just started out sort of as a formal poet. I went to a sort of a traditional high school and then college, and teachers who wrote formally, and so form just the meter became, I can't expel it at this point, even though I do write a lot in free verse like that last poem.
Great. Well, I actually have a question that arose from just hearing both of you read. And again, if anyone has questions about anything, feel free to write them in the chat. I'm really curious about the relationship between writing intimate experience, such as an elegy, and engaging with the larger world, the political, some of the disasters we're seeing. And I'm thinking of what we just heard, the loggers, and then Chard, your poem, Children of Aleppo, and then Liz, the first poem you read about just the recent anti-Semitism, like how, I don't know if you can articulate how that process works for you, when your poetry is engaging with something that's also on the news. And I guess if you want to expand outwards, like what can poetry offer that is different than what we would read in the New York Times or listen to on NPR?
You go ahead, Liz.
Well,
good questions.
What does Shelley say? Something like, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world.
Mm-hmm.
The only part of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal that I read are the opinion columns. Like, I'm obsessed with opinion columns, and they either make me happy or get me angry. And then I set off on my morning walk. And poems are arguments with yourself and with others. And I think the poem is like, if I was allowed to have an opinion column and not get everybody mad at me, that's what my poem is trying to be sometimes. But it is the argument with the world and the argument with self. And sometimes, listening to the news helps me bring out the old arguments that I still haven't settled score with.
Yeah, I agree, Liz. It's and it's an argument that never really ends. We're arguing sort of forever with ourselves about some new news that means something memorable to us. I'm thinking of, since we're thinking of other poets, Pound said that poetry is the news that stays news. Somehow, and it's because it just gets into your head, unlike a news story that you hear on the news. And so you try to write. Every poet is grandiose in his or her thinking about their work, creating news that stays news, whether it does or it doesn't. And but at the same time, you can't you can't be self-conscious about that. Otherwise, you live in a really kind of dangerous echo chamber. So you really, I find I often have to just trust my muse and hope that whatever I'm sort of transcribing from my unconscious. The unconscious becomes more and more important to me the older I get, as far as just finding inspiration. And it seems to be for you too, Liz, in the poems I've read of yours. And so even though I obviously have subjects that I keep coming back to, like the meteorologist or standing beneath a mountain with an illiterate heart, I'm always surprised and grateful for just a weird poem like The Shirt that arrives out of the blue. So the obsession is often yes, we have subjects that we think about all the time and argue with ourselves about all the time, but it's so refreshing too as a poet to be surprised by a completely strange idea that you wake up with in the morning, and then try to develop and discover stuff you didn't know you knew or had dreamt about.
I love that poem about the shirt, and since we're talking about other poets, it made me think of William Carlos Williams' No Ideas But in Things. And
Right.
that poem is an excellent example for all students of poetry, like what the shirt represents, and more deeply the stain. And
Yeah.
I always want to see things in like a biblical perspective. So I'm like, yes, we are all stained and we are all angelic. And
Mm-hmm.
it really resonated with me because I've had to, I've been really wanting to clean out my house, because I just helped my fiance clean out his parents' house when they died. And, we get so attached to weird things. And I kept this ribbon, this beautiful lace ribbon that was on roses my father gave me when my daughter was born, like 30 years ago. And I saved it, and I just kept such good care of it for, 28 years. And I said, here, you should put this on your bouquet. I got it on the day you were born. Isn't it beautiful? No, it's crappy. And she threw it out. And it's like
Yeah.
these things that I have all of these metaphoric attachments to just are going to dissipate. Like I'm going to dissipate, and I just gotta like get real with it and be okay. And anyway, I love that poem so much.
Well, thank you, Liz. You've left something out of with regard to your obsessions, which is important, I think, because I don't know of another poet in the entire world who writes about olfactory subjects as well as you do. And I would just love to hear you say just a few words about your obsession with smell and odor and the muse of the olfactory gland that you have tapped into so incredibly memorably.
Oh, that's nice, Chard. Thanks. Well, there were two polarities I grew up with. One was my grandparents' dairy farm, which was my favorite hangout, and I spent my summers and holidays there. And the other was my mother and her partner both worked in New York City in the fashion industry. And my mother's partner, Nellie, was, worked at the Guerlain counter for a long time in Lord and Taylor. And so, and my sister even worked there. Remember when they used to come spray you with perfume and you didn't want to? My sister did that. And anyway, so there were always very intense smells. And I also have synesthesia that will, like smells will start to seem like colors and anyway. So, and my sense of smell is too intense. Sometimes I feel like I can smell things from the freezer, and I don't know. I've always kind of wondered why that is. And so that's a good question to have and to try to explore. But I was just really taken in with the art of perfumery as a kid, and also just taken in with the weird smells of the barn. And, I think imagistically, and poets tend to go toward the visual. And I was just interested in what kind of metaphors I could find in this overwhelming sensual experience of life that I find myself in. So.
I hope everybody reads Liz's poems in general, but those poems just are so amazing and inspiring at the same time, for me at least.
Yeah, I just put the Atomizer link in the chat for those of you who are watching from home. It really is extraordinary, and the cover is so cool. I don't know if you can see it here, but
Yeah, that's good.
it's an actual Atomizer, but that has the legs of a woman. I love covers, and yeah, the this question of trusting the muse and then transcribing the unconscious, that is I don't know, I love thinking about poetry that way, and then also following the obsessions and what is just churning around within the poet's distracted brain. Chard, thank you for acknowledging that it's hard for poets to keep jobs because we're so distracted. That I just,
Yep.
and I guess I want to maybe we'll do one more question if each of you has a question for each other, and or if anyone from the audience, and then we are going to close with each of you reading a final poem. Will be the end of our event. So any last questions for each other?
I have a question for Chard.
Sure.
What would you say, or what would you tell your younger self from the vantage point you are at now? Like, especially your younger self in a lover's quarrel with the world. Like, what would you tell that young poet now?
Well, that's a really wonderful question, and also a difficult one. It gets back, I think, a little bit to what I was talking about at the beginning of just paying more attention to the other, of experiencing that paradox of discovering yourself in others, and no matter, again, whether it's an animal or even an inanimate object or a person, which is so liberating, is from just a personal standpoint, but as a poet or writer, I think in general, it expands the world infinitely, and it fills one with such joy and inspiration at the same time, but also a sadness and sorrow because of the sweetness you experience in realizing it's ephemeral, that you can't hold on to it for forever. So I think so I think that poets may run away from that at times, but each day is sort of a new challenge of experiencing that bittersweet of continuing that quarrel, but in that quarrel, finding the ecstasy in elegy and in just close, accurate, memorable expression of the world outside you.
That's a wonderful question, and thank you for that response, Chard. That really has me thinking that I do think often younger poets, that it takes a wisdom and confidence to be able to write beyond the self and to venture into the experience of the other. So thinking about very, very young poets, often that is the primary subject. So maybe there is just that natural evolution that happens with age and wisdom and time spent with the page and with language.
It sort of gets back to what I was saying about the frog, about my tongue leaping out of my mouth and becoming a kind of a frog in the distance. So it kind of extended metaphor there for the voice, the tongue of the poet.
Wow. Well, I don't know if there's a question on the Q&A from Vincent.
From Vincent?
Yeah, it says, Chard, how did life in Vermont figure into the Loggers poem?
Oh, That's an interesting, very briefly, I'll answer that. I hope sufficiently. Well, I've been a logger myself, not professionally, but just as far as preparing or cutting wood around the house for the Vermont winters, and so when I've felled trees, mostly dead trees for firewood, I experience this very ambivalent feeling of watching the tree fall across the sky, tearing the sky, as I mentioned in the poem, and uh, and feeling both, great sadness over the death or the felling of the tree, and this kind of, I don't know, this power I have as a human being, is kind of this this dangerous sort of a feeling of ecstasy and of trying to come to terms with it, and so even though I've tried to be a good steward, I've I've identified with what happens when woodsmen and loggers fell trees, and then so I just tried to use my imagination in writing a kind of important caveat about trees and felling and what's happening to the world right now, while at the same time identifying with what loggers experience in that just that practice of felling trees. So um, I think poets especially have to be incredibly honest with themselves about what they're feeling and what they identify with as far as just human activity.
Great. Yeah. Vincent, thank you so much for that excellent question. And I think that kind of authentic experience, I could feel that in the poem.
No, good.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to actually to read that when that's in print. So we're gonna
That's in the Progressive magazine actually published that, and they said, is this poem in praise of logging? And they said, the editor there, a woman named Jules Gibbs, said, yeah, read it again. So they understood it the second time.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I will look for that, and we'll all await your next book as well. So each poet's going to conclude with a poem. Why don't we do Liz and then Chard, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
Oh, thank you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Diana. Yeah, it's I've been thinking a lot about logging too. One of my daughters, I've become obsessed with ancestry.com, and she says, "Oh, you're on Facebook for the dead again." But it's super interesting. I found out that, on my mother's side, there were loggers that were in Maine that came to Vermont. I didn't know that. It was interesting. But and what that relationship is, to walking. I like to walk and in the forest every day if I can, and just sort of listening, what are my questions to the trees and what are their questions to me, because they are they are the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like deer, if we use them we need to eat the whole thing. So anyway, here's another new poem called Pomegranate Street, Waiting for Pies to Bake. What was it on Pomegranate Street? That summer the heat took paint off fences and peels. Of hopping those fences I thought better. I swan dived, I toweled my hair, ate waffles at noon, sewed on a once missing button. The sky told my fortune and it was good. On Pomegranate Street we shaded ourselves on the north side. Houses winked at me, front doors showed no emotion, only the shutters offered an open joy. The sound of a car grinding in reverse, a loud AM radio broadcasting old age's tedious, dusty boredom. I couldn't make equivalences in my head. All I could feel was my buttery, rancid mouth. I was making my way through the neighborhoods as if they were stacks of albums, a different soundtrack for a different street. I could smell the pies, apple, cherry, peach. But on Pomegranate Street, I had all the time collected like fists of beach sand. A regular day, I let go of it, all of it, like I had to let go of the scent of my grandparents. How could I have known then how the skins of apple in my teeth today would remind me of all this nothing that now seemed like so much something?
Mm.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Well, I'll conclude with this poem on the subject we've been talking about, weather woman, and and has a little epigraph here. I've lost my way in the sky. Now where? Osip Mandelstam. Weather woman. The clouds composed a puzzle of runes she learned to solve by studying the charts and doing the math. But oh, how tired she grew from being so literal about tomorrow in the guise of a goddess who knew how mortal she really was. And also bored as she took to gazing higher and then beyond. Just carry an umbrella, she said one evening while on the air, then quit by blowing a kiss and signing off to retire in bliss in her sidereal chair, where she sat back for the rest of her life, beholding the stars and moon and clouds that sang to her, converting sight to sound in songs that made her want to sing along, if only there were words.
That's a wonderful place to conclude. Thank you so much, Chard. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone who joined us from home today. Again, wish we were together in Brattleboro in person, but we're still connected, and we hope in 2022 we'll be back with the in-person festival. And in the moment, if you'd like to check out any of the books there, you can find them in the links in the chat. And we still have some more poetry events this afternoon. There's a panel coming up at 2:30 that Chard and I are both on, writing poetry in the time of the pandemic. And then there's a few other readings later this afternoon and evening. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the poets.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Chard.
Hope to see you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you, and hope we see you soon
I
in
hope.
person.
Yes.